In the recent Deltarune newsletter, Toby Fox made a very interesting statement, saying how, even though he doesn't watch theories on his game, he implies we've gotten something fundamentally wrong. Whatever assumption he's talking about has to be enormous in the way he addresses it, so it can't be something like Starwalker is actually pansexual, not bi. That's why in this video, I'm gonna go over some of the biggest points of discussion in the Deltarune community and see if I can figure out what exactly he was talking about. Keep in mind, I'm not an authority on the topic and will probably get stuff wrong, since I'm no better than the rest of the fandom. I'm also not gonna address everything, since that would take way too long and I talked enough about Eggathon last month. With that said, let's begin. There's a lot of theories about this goat thing, but only one of them is on the required scale. That is, the question of what he actually is. He claims to be a regular old Darkner, but as early as chapter 2 we can tell that this is clearly not the case. When a Darkner enters a dark world that isn't their own, he can chill for a bit before turning to stone, because the fountain rejects them. This has never happened to Ralsei, and it doesn't ever imply that this could happen to him. He also manages to show up in whatever dark world Chris and Susie end up in, no matter its proximity to the school, almost immediately. All of this has led to a lot of theory crafting regarding what the little guy really is. The most prevalent idea for a long time was that he was actually Chris's old horn headband that they wore as a kid to try to fit in more with their family. The band had since disappeared and could be something that Chris always carries with them, which would explain how Ralsei kept showing up and also why he kinda looks like Asriel. The headband represents Chris's wish, look like the rest of their family after all, and all that. Other notable objects include the missing green crayon and, I guess, piles of Asriel's dust if you don't like to engage with media at all. But there is a problem with all of these explanations presented by the end of chapter 5. Ralsei can exist in a dark world without Chris being there, so he can't be something directly tied to them. Chapter 5 did present an alternative idea to his identity though. Could Ralsei be a Plantner? No, probably not. I mean, he would have probably wilted in all that time he spent alone in the castle. So even though it would explain his unique properties and why he can bloom when watered, I don't think that's quite it. It also wouldn't hold the same weight if this reveal came after the flower chapter. Narratively, it wouldn't hit at all. Which means he's probably something else. Probably something related to the Titans and Titanspawn. However, we're now moving deep into speculation territory, which means I think we've left the bounds of what Toby could be talking about. Which means the likelihood of this being the misconception is low. Everyone has their own unique answer to this question. Personally, I think Chris accidentally made her become the Finder.org girl, probably by pushing her into the shelter. This messed her up pretty badly, leaving her mind in the code, and the soulless husk of a body that remained became the knight. Pretty shrimple, right? But Noel's chapter 5 Weirdroot dialogue mentions Des leaving, which she doesn't really do in my version. Either this is an error, it's not. Noel's being kept completely in the dark, or Des is fine and like at college or whatever. To me, the second option does make the most sense. We know Carol wants to preserve everything exactly like it was, even keeping the same Christmas ornaments that the kids made years after the fact. So if one daughter disappears, she can't let the other one get changed through trauma. Well, Noelle is still traumatized because her beloved sister just up and left, but it's still less than the alternative. This could be the cause of the rift that formed between Chris and Noelle. They were pals as kids, but Noelle mentions how they aren't as close anymore. Could be because Chris knows Des's fate and Noelle doesn't. Anyway, that's a tangent. Oh, and I'm not entertaining other night possibilities. Deltarune's story was originally intended to be played through all at once. All this in-between chapter speculation was never meant to happen. And in that case, Death Knight is the only one that makes sense. It's like if you watch a mystery movie and paused every 20 minutes and then thought about and discussed the film for 4 years before watching another 20 minutes. Then you'd also figure out the killer pretty quick. But if you watch it in one sitting, you would be able to see the narrative being told more clearly and be shocked by more obvious twists. Toby Fox is a very competent writer, and I trust his vision. Carol Knight is the in-universe red herring. Rudy Knight might have some evidence, but just wouldn't make sense narratively. Papyrus Knight is a joke, Asriel Knight would just be Undertale again, and Chrysel Knight is just absurd. In other words, the likelihood of this being the misconception is also low. The final prophecy was a key topic of discussion after Chapter 4 dropped, but it isn't talked about nearly as much in this post-Chapter 5 world. No consensus on what it was actually about was ever reached, but the popular ideas were that the Castletown fountain had to be sealed, someone had to die, or just something regarding the angel. None of these really makes sense though. If it was that Castletown had to be sealed, Ralsei wouldn't care. He has shown time and time again that he doesn't really care about his own life and would therefore not be too upset if he had to make the sacrifice play. If the prophecy instead was about someone dying, Susie would behave very differently in Chapter 5. Say that the glass said that the girl had to beat her love to death with her own bare hands. She'd for sure give some indication about Noelle's fate in the date sequence, even just a flinch. If it was Chris dying, she would be even more protective in the first half of Chapter 5's Weird Route. And there's already a different angel prophecy that Susie just didn't really understand or care about. Simply put, we don't think we know enough, we sure as hell aren't united enough for anything regarding the prophecy to be our target. So while we were for sure wrong about the final prophecy, the likelihood of this being the one is yet again low. Friend speculation is the building block all other Deltarune theories are built upon. Hands, devices, mics, shelters and lost girls all find a way to tie back to this fat ass. This puts a really big crosshair on the guy for the purposes of this video. Since Chapter 2, he was assumed to be a mastermind kind of guy. This was because that chapter introduced two creepy smiley faces, the other being what we now know to be Tenna. At the time though, a lot of people assumed the TV face to be Mike due to Spamton's dialogue, and seeing how similar the face in Digital Roots was, they were presumed to be one and the same. Spamton also talked like the guy in the TV was some criminal mastermind, which in turn made Friend a genius manipulator. Even after Chapter 3, when most of this got deconfirmed, the idea of Friend being the big bad, and perhaps Mike, remained. Call it misplaced determination or something, but it refused to die. Even when the cat appeared as Ralsei's go-to example of a Darkner, and when there was a whole flock of them in the Eram fight. Toby must have noticed all of this misplaced belief and therefore patched in that dialogue in Pink's shop, straight up telling the player that no, that cat isn't bright at all, and you were surely mistaken if you thought it was just one feline running around. That's a whole flock of hungry, evil-ass cats, and they will get you. So, this is a confirmed mass misconception, which means that the likelihood of Friend being what Toby was talking about is very high. If you ask me, this was it. Mr. Fox just reiterated it in the newsletter to really hammer home that we should think things through more in general going forward. But I also gotta mention one last thing, since he always has to find a way to show up. Yeah, it could be something gas related, I guess. But like, what then? He isn't actually a pirate. Wow, what a surprise. Maybe isn't green, or maybe has no relationship to the Skelebros. These would all technically fit the criteria mentioned in the newsletter, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel important enough. Like if it was about WD himself, it would have to be on the scale of he isn't actually the intro/credits voice. But that wouldn't make sense in the slightest. You all know the gist of device theory at this point, right? I really hope you do. Because it kinda proves that Gaster is real and he is the author of the game. So the likelihood of it being something Gaster is medium, I guess. It for sure could be, but every assumption about Gaster is made from a desperate attempt to get something about the guy. We don't know enough to confidently assume a lot.
Hey boys!
Remember kids, always stay vigilant and alert. Form your own conclusions about this game's story and don't just blindly follow what others say. Keep re-evaluating your thoughts and maybe one day you'll become the first literate Deltarune fan. Oh, and what you just watched was totally and utterly a cash grab. The only reason this exists is because the last video blew up and I needed some extra money. Don't expect any more Deltarune videos from me until I run out again. If you want to support me and be the only person with your name on the screen, lob some money at my Patreon. I promise to update it more once I've got one of you on the hook. But speaking of my next video, I don't really know when it's releasing. I'm gonna study in Japan for 5 months starting in September, and I'm unsure if my laptop can handle video making. I'm gonna prepare a bunch of stuff there and make a bunch of different videos possible to produce in the future, but I can't promise anything dropping before March next year. Unless I manage to squeeze one more out before I leave. Maybe two. We'll see. Anyway, subscribe so you don't forget about me, and like the video even if you didn't like the video. Bye.